let's bring in Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross for a bit more insight into this latest advisory. Bryan, no surprise, of course, still disorganized as it sits in the Caribbean, but has certainly a future to intensify as we look into the days ahead.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, though, that the computer forecasts have not forecast how intense these hostile upper-level winds are going to be, which is delaying the intensification process. Kind of puts a little question mark in your head on whether they're going to continue longer than forecast. But in any case, we'll have to go with the information we have, and here's what it is. So when we look at the satellite, we see a couple things here. First of all, look at this very flat front on the system here. That's telling you that there are strong upper-level winds coming in this direction here, and indeed they're 20 to 30 miles per hour blowing in there and blowing this dry air over here into the system. On the other hand, look over here and you can see this kind of circulation in here. That's in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So the whole system is kind of tilted over because these upper-level winds are pushing on the top of it. And because it's tilted over, it can't get the engine running, so to speak. It's like throwing sand in the gears. You can see this. Look at the clouds here and the direction they're moving here. These are the upper-level clouds that are part of that flow that's pushing dry air into the circulation right now. So the Hurricane Center is saying 50-mile-an-hour winds, 1,000 millibars is the pressure, and just barely moving west-northwest at 2 miles per hour. So the question is, what's going to happen with these winds here? The forecast is that by the end of the day tomorrow, they should be letting up and perhaps some intensification would begin. Here's where the Hurricane Center is locating the system as the center of the circulation down at the ocean level, at the Caribbean Sea level, is right there. But here you see the thunderstorm is way over here because the system is tilted because of those winds I was talking about. And here you can see these arcs coming out here, these arc clouds right in there, with the upper level clouds blowing that way and the lower level winds blowing that way. So when you get that kind of going on in the atmosphere, again, not a conducive situation for developing. There's where the model puts the center, and it looks right where the Hurricane Center has it. This is the European model that we're looking at here. So this is a very moist flow coming up here on top of the system. That's going to be important, I think, for the islands, especially Jamaica, maybe Haiti and parts of the Dominican Republic, because that flow is going to just be continuous up in that area with this very slow-moving storm. All right, so here's the cone, and yes, it's a very funky-looking cone from the Hurricane Center, and we've drawn the center line so you can sort of make it out. It's because the cone is all squished because the system isn't moving very much. Remember, it's only moving 2 miles per hour right now. So by tomorrow afternoon, the thinking is some intensification, maybe 60 mile an hour, 65 miles per hour on Friday. So next 2 days, still in that quasi-hostile kind of condition, but then that is forecast to let up at the same time that the system is drifting kind of northish, and then it kind of drifts over toward the west. Now, does it come up here closer to Jamaica? Does it stay just south? But remember, that moisture flow is on the north side of the system, or does it kind of turn down here quite a ways south and keep the core of the moisture away from Jamaica? So it's just really close to call there. Let's look 2 more days. Now we go till Monday afternoon, and look what we have here, 130 mile an hour category 4 hurricane. How close to Jamaica is it, or does it dive down in here in kind of a nowhere's land? There are a few islands down there, honestly, but away from the more populated islands in the northern Caribbean. And how about the moisture flow and affecting those mountainous islands? So this is a big question mark when we get to the first of the week. And then what happens after that? Well, what happens after that next week is it is going to get pulled out of the Caribbean. And the question is exactly where. Now, when we look at the Google AI models, you can see there are kind of 2 camps here. One is it just kind of stalls around here somewhere, and then does it go up north here? That's the first dip in the jet stream, could scoop it up, or the consensus is it kind of comes over in here eventually south of Jamaica somewhere. How close to Jamaica is an open question. If this turns into a category 4 or 5 hurricane, how close is going to be a very important question coming up. All right, now when we add the GFS and the European models, the red is the European, the yellow is the GFS, what you see is the real forecast here, kind of sorting all this out, is that eventually the system is going to go to the northeast, over Cuba, over Jamaica, over Haiti, one of those possibilities in that range, depending on how long it hangs out in the Caribbean, how strong it gets, and other factors, exactly where it lifts north. But there's a very high consensus it is going to lift north, and that's what's going to happen. When we look at the consensus of the traditional models, the GFS and the European and the UK Met and a few others, you see it kind of comes up, starts like the Hurricane Center, and then takes on off to the northeast, and it does that sooner, where the Hurricane Center, you can see, takes the system farther on off to the west. When we look at the Google AI consensus, just based on that model, very much like the Hurricane Center, coming north, then coming west, then zooming on off to the north over the eastern part of Cuba. So we're settling in on a track something like that, but still we have a pretty good range across Cuba and over toward Haiti. When you add all that up and say, okay, what are the odds of it being in any one location? You can see, unfortunately, we have certainty here in the short term. And unfortunately, this area in here, south of Jamaica, is a favored area, adding up all those odds that you saw, because now the circulation is going to come like this, and it's going to come across the southern part of Hispaniola there with Haiti and the Dominican Republic and slam into the mountainous island of Jamaica. So this is kind of a dangerous looking situation for late in the weekend into early next week in Jamaica. And then, of course, if it comes out in here and then turns north, the bad side of the storm, the right side of the storm, is staying on toward Jamaica. Jamaica is on that side of the storm all the way through that process. So this is a situation where in Jamaica, people really need to be thinking about a lot of rain on the higher elevations, coming downhill, the traditionally dangerous areas, and so forth. All right, so what's driving all this? Well, it is the jet stream. It is late in the year, so the jet stream is dipping far south. It's over Florida now. There's where the storm is, not really affecting it yet, maybe starting to nudge it north just a tiny little bit. So let's go forward in time to tomorrow. Now the jet stream is dipping down and trying to pull it north. And those models that showed it going over Haiti, this is what's getting it and pulling it in that direction. The National Hurricane Center is thinking that that's not going to happen. The Google AI model says that's likely to not happen. So we're just going to keep an eye and see how far north this thing can pull it tomorrow. Then it moves on out of the picture. And then we're looking at the European model here and the Hurricane Center forecast. So the icon is the Hurricane Center forecast. European has a very, very strong hurricane not far southwest of Jamaica here on Tuesday. So this is going to be a very close issue for exactly where the worst of this storm is and where Jamaica is relative to that, with a Category 4, can't rule out a Category 5 hurricane in that vicinity somewhere. And then you can see it gets pulled to the north. Here comes a strong dip in the jet stream here. Now it's going to pull it north. Here we are Wednesday, and then it just zooms on out and it's gone. It gets kind of absorbed in this very strong dip here of low pressure over the eastern part of the U.S. This is still down here because this is only a 5-day forecast. This goes all the way to Friday of next week. So that's the plan. Exactly the angles involved and how close it is to these islands, that's the open question, because here's the bottom line. Based on the forecast right now, you can see where the heavy rain is. Look at this. The southern half of the Dominican Republic, Tiburon Peninsula, and Haiti, and we've got the dark reds there. That's 2 feet of rain. Same story over eastern Jamaica, a good part of Jamaica, 2 feet of rain, maybe even more up in the purples. That's up to 3 feet of rain. And we've seen some indications it could even be more in some spots. So this whole area in here, all these islands, just depends exactly on the track, exactly where the moisture is going. Even Puerto Rico, 2 to 4 inches of rain forecast there. So some potential flooding there. Stay in close touch with the National Weather Service out of San Juan if you're on Puerto Rico. But Jamaica, eastern Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, this could be a catastrophic situation in some of these areas, depending on exactly where that moisture flows.
Yeah, especially with the elevation. And we know that the landslide, mudslide potential and how high that's going to get. So, Bryan, I mean, this is just, it's a storm that we're going to be watching a week from now before maybe it takes that turn. So there's going to be a lot of change, I'm sure, that's still to come, but of course, something that we're going to zero in on with your expertise. Appreciate the forecast analysis. Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Bryan Norcross. We'll check back in.